everybody, I hope y'all are doing well. I hope y'all are having a great day today. So today I thought that we would go ahead and continue on talking about identity. And so this is the next step following the previous video that I made talking about just taking the next step. So the last video that I made, if you haven't watched that or even any of the other videos, go back and watch those and then come back to this one. So the previous video was, just to summarize a little bit, was just talking about how when you take the steps of imagination, dreaming, all of these things that I've mentioned, the step after that will be to actually just take the next step. So something will begin to manifest itself in your physical reality. And you will see either, for example, let's say you've been manifesting a certain look for yourself. You might see that kind of dress or fashion at the store. Or maybe you've been, wanting this certain kind of job and an opportunity comes up. So the next thing would be to naturally take that next step of purchasing that dress or taking that job. So you would just move into your manifestation as it begins to open. And so it's not going to just all happen at once. There will be openings and space for you to take that next step. And then from there, it begins to manifest more and more. But you have to take that first step if that's what you want to do, right? So anyhow, the next step after that is what I'm talking about now. And one thing that you'll notice is kind of setbacks and things happening where maybe you will begin to doubt yourself and think, oh, this isn't really working out how I thought it did. Or you won't want to take that next step. Maybe a job opportunity will be presented to you, or an opportunity for, if you're wanting to date someone or something like that, somebody will come ask you on a date, but you refuse it, or you deny, any kind of help with something that you've been wanting help with. So you will maybe begin to self-sabotage this journey. So you have to be aware of that. If you're doing that, to be careful. The other thing will be that you may want to just naturally be wanting to go slow. If that's happening, you have to check with yourself. Is that okay with yourself to be going slow? Do you want to manifest this slowly, or do you want to manifest this fast? So me personally, if I have a desire, if there's something that I want to manifest, I want it to happen fast. That just may be my nature of being a little bit more impatient. I've always been very impatient. I've always been someone that does things very quickly and makes decisions very fast. And I know not everybody is like that. As a matter of fact, all my family and just people around me were always telling me to slow down. So when I would make decisions about things in my career or in relationships or, in my life in general, when I make a decision, I make it pretty quickly. I decide and I go ahead with it. So for other people, that's kind of scary because the kind of things that I'm talking about were like, I guess I could just share, for example, some of the things in my life that have happened. Again, this is part of my nature of always being a little impatient. So for some people this works, for some people it doesn't. For me, it did work. And the reason that it did work is because every time I went fast and made a decision to move forward with something in my life, it was because I listened to my heart. I've always had an intuition that I've listened to. I've always also had the people don't really know what you go through when you make decisions, but at the time, thinking back on some of these decisions that I made, I did think them through to a certain level, and then I decided, but I didn't let that decision, if there was something I didn't know about how something would turn out, which we never know how something will turn out. If there's something I didn't know, I would try to just sink into that unknowing, and just kind of get used to the feeling of not knowing what will happen, but expecting the best. So yes, there's a lot of times you're going to make a decision and you're not going to know how it turns out. Pretty much almost every decision will be like that. But you have to just keep that mindset that it's all going to turn out in your favor. And if you have evidence of it in your history, in your past, for example, just thinking back on past times that you've made decisions quickly like this, how has it turned out? Because when I look back on my past and some of these decisions, for the most part, they have always benefited me. And they have always been in line with what I needed, or they were the next step in what I needed to get to the next step. Even those failures were all needed to move on to the next step. So when you're making decisions about what you're manifesting, you want to probably move quickly with it. Most people do want to develop and manifest their desires quickly. But if you feel like it's more comfortable to go slowly, then go slowly. So this video will be more focusing on going fast, if that's what you resonate with. And I'll kind of give some examples of things in my life that I've moved on fast with, and what has happened recently with this whole thing since my awakening. So in the past, I've always been someone that's moved fast with decisions. For example, growing up, I always just kind of made my own way with things. I was a child that kind of just played on their own. I was a little bit more solitary than most people, and I would come up with ideas and, go out for the day and go ride my bike and do things and create things with my imagination, just like we're talking about now. So I would ride around and find treasures. I would pretend that I was, treasure hunting, that I was fairy hunting, ghost hunting, you name it. I started a museum as a child. All of these things were happening pretty much like they do when you're a child. But that didn't stop there for me. I just continued on. Basically, in high school, I wasn't ever really involved as a child in like sports or any of those things like they do now, the organized sports where, kids are signed up for karate and this and that. I did go to some classes, but not as much. So I wasn't really ever really good at anything like really, great at a certain sport like basketball or volleyball that I tried out for. But I would always try out for everything. Every time there was a tryout for something, I'd try out. I tried to volunteer for everything. I didn't let anything stop me, really. I was wanting to be involved, even though I was a pretty big introvert. I was always just wanting to discover something new and try something new. So anytime that happened, I would do that. So I became involved in like color guard, and it was, you kind of do flags. It's kind of like a mixture between ROTC, dance, and other things like that. So it's a little bit more art related. And so we would go along with the band during football season, then we'd have competitions and stuff in the spring. So that's what I did, and I knew nothing about this stuff. I just jumped straight into it. So that's kind of been the experience of my life. I've just always just jumped straight into things that I knew nothing about. So just jumping into the unknown, and that continues on to this day. So anyhow, that's what I did then. And then shortly after that, I knew that something just didn't feel right for me where I was in my home and in my environment. So I was ready to move on with that. So I went to college. I started on with college. So I started my college career, and I started in a degree that I didn't really know a whole lot about, which was pharmacy. But I wanted to be a pharmacist. I thought that would be a good career, that it would be a good decision in my life. Now, I just jumped straight into college doing that, but I always kind of knew that I would go to college, so that wasn't too surprising for me. After a year or two, I really could resonate a whole lot more with psychology and religion, so that I switched my majors to psychology and religion. And so my background, my degree is in psychology, and I have another degree in religious studies. So strangely enough, I still use that today, and it has benefited me to this day. So all of these things continue to grow and benefit me today. So that was what I did in college. And while I was in college, I met my first husband, and we dated for about 6 months, and then he proposed to me. And I was a little bit like kind of hesitant at first. But then I knew it was a good decision for me because I thought it out. Like I say, I think things through, but not like it doesn't take me more than a day or two. And so I decided I did want to get married, and I went ahead and I got married at 20 years old, and I started my life. So we moved in together, everything like that, started working, and I graduated from college around that time. And so everything was good. And then I started trying to conceive because it was in my heart that I wanted to have a child. And so I was only like 21 years old when we started trying to conceive. But I know that sounds young, but I knew that I wanted to be a mother. That was something that I knew about myself. And it was non-negotiable. So, but what was negotiable is when we would do it. So my husband actually wanted to wait. He said he wanted to wait till things were, just more figured out. What everybody was used to saying in those times, just kind of waiting till everything was figured out, that we had more stability in our job, in our home, and where we live and stuff like that. But for me, I didn't think I had to wait. I felt like this was the time. I was ready. We had a home. We were together. We were married. And this was the time. So for me, there is no waiting. I don't see why wait to somehow something's going to magically change in 5 years or 10 years within your household or within your job. You might accumulate more money, or you might be exactly the same. So it's not exactly, to me, a financial thing. It's more of, are you ready in your heart for a child? Are you ready to take care of a child? Of course, look at the finances and everything like that. But, you know, it's not likely that, you know, you get married and right away you're going to have a ton of money, or you're going to have all this and that. You know, you just go on with your life. So I just felt like that was just part of life. You get married and you start having kids. So for me, it wasn't such a stress to think, oh, I need to really get my life together in some way. I knew that that was the part of my life that I actually wanted the most. So everything else would have to go around me having a child. So I kind of look at things differently. I look at the things that I like and want as what's going to be in my life, and like work or outside responsibilities, they kind of fit around that. So for me, I don't see it that way. So it's very easy for me to switch careers, jobs, things like that, because if they don't fit with what I actually want in my life, I don't want it. It just doesn't fit. It's making everything not work. So I'll give more examples of that a little bit later on. But I had trouble conceiving. I couldn't conceive for 2 years, and then we went to go see a fertility specialist around the time I was 22 and 23. And we did some testing and stuff, and right before they were going to start testing on me, because they tested on my husband first, I turned up pregnant. So that was a great surprise, and we didn't have to do any more fertility treatments or, you know, go further with that whole fertility treatment and stuff like that. We didn't have to go any further with that. We naturally were able to conceive after 2 years. And so at 23 years old, I had my first daughter, and she's my only daughter. And she's the best decision that I ever made, and I'm glad I did that, and I'm glad that I went so quickly with it, because since then I have never been able to conceive again. And, you know, my true desire was to be a mother. And so this is a true beautiful manifestation that happened at that time. And at that time, I didn't know anything about the stuff I know now, but I would lay in bed and visualize and think about having a daughter. When we were trying to conceive, I would buy items, and I had basically like a little hope chest full of things that I wanted for my daughter. Clothes, toys, little things that I was collecting for her that I thought were sentimental and cute. And so everything was being prepared for her, even though she hadn't been conceived, and there was the possibility we wouldn't even be able to have children because we hadn't been able to conceive. So, but I knew in my heart that regardless, I was going to be a mother, and it manifested. So I didn't know anything about that at that time, but it all worked out in the same way that we're talking about it today. So you can kind of look back on your life and see how those sorts of things played out for you. Now, as far as jobs in my life, I've worked in social work, and I've worked a lot of different things. At 18 years old, I was managing a domestic violence shelter in my town. So I started off with that, and that was a shocker, you know, seeing everything, women coming in, beat up, people that were just in a lot of trauma and pain, and children that were in the midst of all this. It was a lot. And then, so also that center was not just a domestic violence center, but it was also a sexual assault center. So I got all those phone calls from hospitals, from victims that had been sexually assaulted. So I was going through all of that when I was 18 years old, working there, going to college, all of this, but I jumped straight into it. I wasn't going to go work at McDonald's or, you know, all of this. I was ready to get in my career and start working, so I did that. And so I continued on working at different social workplaces. I went to a different domestic violence shelter. I worked there on the hotlines, like I say, working, and that was when my daughter was a baby. I did that so I could stay home some. And so I was working over the phone and at nights and stuff like that. And so after that, my husband I had to change the jobs, and then my husband lost his job, and we had to move, and that move was a big shift for me. I remember feeling like I was really leaving my family, and that was the first time that I would really be separate from them. And so I moved to Arizona and got a job there and started continuing working there. And it was really nice. I really enjoyed it. In that time, I worked with children and parents that were at the risk of being abused. The children were at the risk of being abused, kind of teaching them parenting skills and things like that. And so at that time, I found out that my first husband was hiding things from me, and so there was a big trust issue going on. And in that time, I made the decision right away that that relationship was not going to work for me. Even though I was married, even though we had a child together, it was not going to work for me. So I made the decision to leave, and I moved. I moved back to where I grew up, and I started over again. And then I bought a house, and all of these things I did, like, I made these decisions overnight. Like, literally something would happen and I'd make that decision, I'd go. So I found out about my husband not being trustworthy. Within that night, I had made a decision. The next week or two, we were moving. So after that, you know, when we got back into my hometown, I found a job, like, literally the week that I moved there. I started working with refugees from other countries that were coming to the United States. Refugees from Syria, Cuba, Honduras, El Salvador, Mexico, just working with children and families that were coming in as refugees. So at that time, I literally interviewed and took a job within the first week that I got to my hometown. And so I was moving very quickly. And at the time, that job benefited me in the way that while I was helping refugees get settled in a new country, find apartments, find community support, you know, find save up money, do all these things. At the same time, I was doing that because I was having to rebuild my life after separating from my husband. So that's what I was going through at that time. And it was just, strangely enough, exactly what I needed. And then it became too much. It became too overwhelming. There was too much of a caseload, and it was too far away from where I lived. So I made the choice to move, and I literally bought the first house that I found, and it was the perfect house for me. This house, if I could be transformed into a house, you know, if I could be a house, that house would be me. It literally represents me. It's on the water. It's basically a mermaid house. The insides of it is just all custom with all these cute little things, and then I transformed that into more of a mermaid home because I collect mermaids and things like that. So that was my haven. You know, it was a small little cottage, and I bought that within, you know, a month of finding it. I bought it cash. I didn't even have to wait, just got in there, and I was there. And before I moved there, like 2 days before I found out that I was going to go ahead with the house, I found a job there. So everything always aligns and moves very quickly for me. I literally was offered a job on the spot, walking in to work as a teacher at a Head Start center. And so I took the job and I moved there, and then I lived there. And so everything worked out, and you wouldn't believe, but literally I had just enough money to move there. Everything was always working out for me just perfectly. You know, I'll make a video about that on some other time about my finances and how that's kind of transformed. But everything was just always just enough for me to do whatever I needed to do. So I began working at that Head Start Center, and I absolutely loved it. It really opened up my child center, probably like a child thing in me. I enjoyed working with the kids, playing with them, singing with them, reading books, doing crafts. It was really just like a soul energizing type of work. I absolutely loved it. And so I did that for a while, and then I thought, you know what, I think I want to move up in my career. There wasn't a lot of space to move up in your career at Head Start. So I started working at a different center, and I worked there for a couple years and then was promoted to management. And so I began working as a director of basically a small counseling center with a few clinicians under me. So I did that for a while, and then I also, you know, here and there did one-on-ones and counseling sessions on my own with clients and stuff. But that was my career, and I've always just been able to move through jobs very easily, interview and get the jobs. And I've always worked, everywhere I've worked, I've always probably worked there twice. They've always asked me to come back, or I've always come back in some capacity. So that's another thing about you as a person, just in general. You know, if you work somewhere, if you have a relationship with someone, a friendship, a love relationship, you want to leave that relationship or that job or whatever in good standing. You want to leave it better than you left it, or you want to leave it where you have left something behind for them. So that's my motto usually with everywhere I've worked, people I've known. So I've always had opportunities open to me because of that. And so I've been able to work again at these places again. So anyway, I just kind of moved on again, and in that time I met my second husband, which is my husband now. And I met him, and within 6 months he had proposed to me. And again, my family, my friends, everybody was saying that I was moving too fast. So this is kind of a theme. Every time I would move or make a decision, family, friends, everybody would say I was moving too fast, that I was being too crazy, this and that. But I knew deep down inside what was right for me. And I knew if I waited, that wouldn't make me very happy. So it was time to move on. So you know your speed. You know what level or what speed you should move at. Essentially, if you want things to happen fast, you move fast. So the reason I say just move fast is because there's really no consequences to this. I mean, if you move fast or you move slow, you're either going to manifest it quickly or slowly. Either way, it's going to manifest. So it's up to you and what your comfort level is. But yeah, so I've always kind of moved fast with everything. And I think that has really benefited me in life because I didn't really talk about my twin flame here, but at some point in my story, I did meet my twin flame. And my twin flame was kind of a chance situation. If you've ever read my book or heard some of my past stories, you might know a little bit about that story. If you haven't, you can check out my book down below. It's for sale on Amazon, or if my other videos are up, you can watch those. I'm starting to reopen some of my older videos. I had taken them down thinking that they weren't very clear, and maybe some things that I've said on there, I just didn't think that would benefit people too much, and I wanted to kind of make it more practical. So I took those videos down, but I'm thinking to maybe bring them back because I watched some of them and I really noticed a change in just the way that I would speak, and just it seemed like the energy was a lot lower and things like that. So I think it's good for people to see and watch older content and new content and see the changes that happen even within a year. So I may begin to reopen that. But anyway, going back to the twin flame. So at some point I met my twin flame, and that was a chance thing. I met him at a Starbucks, and he just met me, and we locked eyes and instantly knew that we were connected. So that was a chance thing. And if I had been a person that was very, very cautious or didn't take any risks at all, I would have never went with my twin flame. So my experience with moving fast and going with your heart is that it opens up so many more magical and new experiences for yourself. So there'd be times somebody would offer me a trip somewhere. I took a trip to California by chance like that. Somebody just offered me one and I took it. I took a trip to St. Croix. Somebody offered me a trip like that, and then to Arkansas. And so when these things happen, opportunities happen when somebody offers you a trip, or somebody offers you a job, or somebody gives you a gift, or a new person enters your life in a romantic way or a friendship way, take it. Take that step. Go with it, because it's an adventure. Everything opens something new. And you will not believe the beautiful adventures out there, even in just the short few things that I've risked myself on and went forward on when people said, hey, slow down. I have experienced amazing things that I haven't ever heard other people experience. So open yourself up to that. Be open to it. You're safe. You're held. Everything is okay. You're not going to lose something by taking these risks. But of course, listen to your heart. If it doesn't feel right, it's not right. You have to feel it. And in these cases, it felt right for me. So I went with it, and I went fast. And it really benefited me and paid off in the end. So those are just some examples of things that have happened that have kind of led me to where I am today. So this kind of goes back also into what's the purpose for your life, or what's to come. So as things begin to manifest and open up, you may begin to see a pattern. You may begin to see, hey, this is actually maybe what this character, this form was here for. Each character, each form is here with its own specific preferences, its own specific gifts, its own specific ways of being. Just like there's different species of things, like maybe there's, you know, a starfish in the ocean, and then there's a dog on land, and, you know, whatever, a bird in the sky. Each one has its own gifts, its own talents, and its own purpose, and just why it's here. What does it do? So the next step for me, and you're on this journey with me, it's not necessarily that I know everything. I don't. I can only share my experiences, and those that went well for me and those that didn't. So that's what this is all about. But basically, the next step for me is just to kind of understand myself better. I think that's really important because everything's coming from within. So to understand myself better, to understand the dynamics maybe of femininity and masculinity more, just maybe learn a little bit more about spirituality, things like that. So that's where I'm headed. But I've kind of noticed that in this journey, everything's kind of tying together. So when I grew up as a child, my parents bought one of the first video cameras that ever came out to the public, and they saved up all their money to buy this video camera so that they could videotape me and my brother growing up. At first it was just me, and then my brother was born. But my dad, he basically was like the original YouTuber, because he would follow me around, follow my brother around. He would do interviews of family members. He would do like tours of the city. He did all of these videos at that time when I was really a small child, like 2 or 3 years old, up until, I don't know, like, you know, an older child. And so we watched all these videos recently, and it really clicked with me that I've been on camera for a long time. And then there was a time that I wasn't on camera, so maybe between like when I was in middle school to high school. And in that time, I really yearned to be on camera. I was actually a very shy person in my natural state. But I didn't have the camera at that time, and I really yearned for that camera. So what I did was I started acting. Even though I was a very shy person, I started acting at school, and I joined the theater program. I even got into advanced theater. I was in several plays. I worked behind the scenes. So I was preparing myself, and I was wanting to be on camera. I was wanting to be in front of the camera in some capacity. So anyway, that became my dream, and I really wanted to go to Los Angeles, and I was really, really dreaming about that. And I had weird things happen to me, like I was able to do like a small horror movie here in Houston where I lived. I went and auditioned, and I did that. I modeled for a while for like Macy's and Invisible Changes. I did things like, I had all these opportunities begin to open for me around that time that I was wanting to do this. Then one day I went to like a Chinese restaurant, and a man came up to my mom and told her that I was meant for Hollywood and that he would see me on TV. So it was really strange things like that would happen, and it wasn't really anything I could say is very special about me that anybody would just go out of their way to say that. So it was just very unusual. You know, I just didn't feel like it. It just felt very like magical. Like it just didn't seem like it would normally happen. So things were beginning to manifest at that time, and so who knew that one day I would be on YouTube, and it would be so easy to record videos and put them out for the whole world. You know, at that age when I was 18, wanting to go to Hollywood, YouTube didn't even exist. You know, the internet was new. There was nothing like this. If you wanted to be on TV, you did have to go to Hollywood. You did have to go through, you know, showbiz business and get on TV that way. But now it's so accessible to everyone. Who knew that all of this was preparing me for one day making a YouTube video after having a non-dual awakening? You know, it's just the craziest thing. So when, you know, you're talking about what you're going to do when you grow up, or a plan for your life, you never know. It's going to always be changing, and what you may be doing 5 years from now might not even be in existence today. So that's how crazy this is. You just have to go with your heart and do what feels right, and everything builds upon each other till one day, you know, it's all comes together, and who you are and all those gifts you've had along the way all begin to work, in connection with one another to develop something wonderful. So I just feel like all of these things have kind of led me up to that. After I had my daughter, I also started a blog. It's called Building Rainbows, and I actually wrote a children's book called Building Rainbows. It's a children's book with over 200 child activities. And so when my daughter was little, that was another thing that kind of led up to me doing YouTube. I was a blogger, not a vlogger, but a blogger. So I would take pictures of different activities and different things we did with my daughter, and I would create activities, I would create curriculums and write them out and things like that. So that was something that I did for when my daughter was little. And so I became very used to the internet and talking to other people online and doing that sorts of stuff. And then after that, there was a time that I stopped doing the blog when my daughter became a little older. And then I started my life coaching. So I started life coaching and doing one-on-one sessions with people on the side. I built my own website. I did all of these things, all of these skills. I'm starting to use them again because I had put them away when, I stopped kind of life coaching. I started to just focus more on my career, my job. And so I put all that stuff away. I didn't really use the website and all this stuff. Well, now I'm finding myself today trying to create a new website, doing these things. So all these things I used to do in the past and I kind of learned a few things from, I'm having to do again. And it's easier now because I know some of it. Yes, technology has changed. Yes, things have come a long way. But I'm able to do this now. And it's actually all these skills from the past are all working together today and making my life so much easier in what I'm doing now. Essentially, I feel like maybe my heart is very much in wanting to talk to y'all and spread some of the journey and messages that I'm having, these insights, these different things that are happening. So I'm going to continue on making videos for y'all, and I'm trying to do other things for y'all to have more of a community type thing or more interaction and just have more of a bigger group. So I'm working on making a website and doing things like that. So everything's just kind of coming together in life, and you'll notice that in your own life. Things just don't seem to make sense. Like, why did I do that and then stop doing it? Or why did I spend all this time or live this life for so long this way? Well, it's all coming together. There were so many parts of my life that were very difficult as well. I went through growing up in a difficult childhood. My family has a curse with addiction. I myself had an addiction and broke that. I had a lot of issues with anxiety, depression, sleep, panic attacks, health issues. I mean, you name it, I've been through it. And it's just all of those things, even those negative things, were just stepping stones to the next step. And they give space, they open you up, and they also teach you lessons, because you can't have something like this happen to you and not think about it, not reflect on it, not have it come up as a nightmare, not have it come up as an automatic thought. You're constantly bombarded with these traumatic things that happen until you deal with them. So they're going to keep coming up as something for you to look at. And when you do, that just only heals you and puts you back into your power. What happens with these traumas and these things that happen in life is that they kind of add a layer to you. They kind of add armor and like this hard layer of skin over you. And that's not really you. That's just a protection. That's not really you for something that's not really happening now. So yeah, all of those things, even as bad as they were, they begin to open you up, and they actually begin to be something that you see in your timeline, in your past, as being something that was necessary to get to the point where you're at today. So everything in life, you can't really hold a lot of shame, regret, or guilt for anything, because everything is happening for the better good of everything. So if you look at it that way and that's your perspective, life is beautiful. So look back on your life, see all those beautiful times, and even journal about it and try to make sense of it. You're going to see these connections. It's going to be like, wow, all of that was happening for what is happening today, and how beautiful life is. So I hope that y'all can look back on your life and see all of that. Maybe if you want, share in the comments anything that you've noticed about your life. and keep dreaming, keep desiring what you want. You can be in a state of acceptance and bliss and just being with what is. I was there. It's beautiful. If you're not in that state, though, if you're having desires come up, go with it. You have all the power and you have all the possibility to have that here and now. So it's totally possible for you. Thank you for watching, and come back and watch again.